Hey guys, it is another Saturday morning chat. I'm gonna talk about a couple things till folks start getting in here. I know it looks like there's a couple folks in here waiting already, so that's cool. But it always sort of takes these things a few minutes to get fired up and people to get joining us. But today we're going to talk primarily. Hey, there's Jerry. How's it going, Jerry? Good to see you, man. But today we're going to talk primarily about the thin brick that's on the wall back here behind me, and kind of the entire process, not just laying it, but thinking through what was going on before I started to lay all the brick. I think most of you know I'm an architect. My background is architecture and design, and everything I do in the shop, I always try and think of it through a designer's eyes, right? Because that's what I am. But then also, as far as the videos and that sort of thing goes, trying to explain them through a designer's eyes, because I think those who aren't designers or who don't design things on a daily basis, number one, underestimate their ability to design cool things, but number two, don't always understand the opportunities that are available. So this wall, when I moved in, and shame on me, I should have had a picture of it when I moved in. I guess I could probably pop it up on my phone if I sit here and jack with it long enough. But essentially, when I moved in, it was really ugly drywall. Oh, I've got to have a picture here close. Hang on. It was really ugly drywall, and I couldn't cover it up fast enough. For some reason here in Colorado, all of the home builders think it's okay to just leave garages as what they call fire tape. Sorry, I'm not ignoring everybody, trying to get to the right picture on my phone here. But they just fire tape it, which means they put the drywall up and then they just tape the joints and leave it. And they use this really ugly yellow drywall here in garages, and it's a fire rated drywall, and I don't know if the local laws require it to be colored differently. Here we go, I found the pictures. I don't know if they require it to be colored differently, but it's really kind of gross when you look at it, so I'm just going to hold these up to the camera because Lord knows I can't, the technology isn't going to work for me. Hang on, cancel. The technology is not going to work for me to upload these and share them and all that kind of stuff. But you can see they just sort of leave this stuff just yuck. And this area is right by where that red truck was. And it was just kind of this gross thing. And I thought, man, I can't have that in my, like the place I work, I can't have that. I got to have something that, I don't know, that feels like a workshop, doesn't feel like this warehouse thing. So I see a couple other folks have hopped in. I see Johnny on there from down the road in Colorado Springs. How you doing? Cecil's in here, and Daryl Silverhorse. Nice to see you guys. So anyway, didn't want my workshop to just look like that sterile warehouse environment. So it was like, what can I do? And I thought, it would be really cool. I see a lot of people with shops that are in old loft buildings, or these old industrial buildings is what I would say, and I wanted my shop to have that feel. So I thought immediately, I've got to do some brick, and the brick I need is going to be more of a rustic or vintage type of brick, and so that's what I started looking for. And I got a hold of the people at General Shale, and this is not an advertisement for General Shale. They just happen to be one of the brick suppliers that's local, and they also have a really great selection. And on top of that, they had some really helpful people. And they make a commercially available, as well as a prosumerly available thin brick. So like anybody can walk into their store and buy thin brick. They have it packaged, ready to go. Sometimes you have to order it and they have to cut some things, but by and large, they just have a good selection of stuff you can go pick up. Sorry, I'm thirsty this morning. It's really dry here right now. But anyway, what you get when you buy them is you get them in boxes, and they're these, and it's actually a real brick that's cut down. So the real brick looks like this, and these are what you call a tumbled brick. There are more styles of brick than I care to get into, but this is a typical modular brick. So it's 8 inches wide, it's 2 and some change tall, and about 3 inches deep. And what they do is they go in and they slice the face off this brick. I'm trying to hold it up there, but they take a big saw and they slice the faces off. And sometimes on the backs of these, you can see saw marks sometimes, not all the time. And sometimes they leave a little chunk that you got to clean up. But essentially, you get that tumbled face that you would get in a full-size brick, and then they just slice it off and you can glue it to the wall. What's nice about these is you don't have to handle these monster bricks. They're not very, these are very light in comparison to the bricks. But if you're going to put brick in a building, whether it's inside or outside or on the, wherever it is, you have to pour a big concrete footing to hold the weight of all the masonry. It's a massive amount of weight. And with the thin brick, you don't have to do that. You can just literally put on a construction adhesive and glue it to the wall. So from that perspective, very user-friendly. The other thing that they can provide are these corner pieces, which these are what sell the dream. If you're trying to make it look like real brick and you don't have corner pieces like this, it looks like the brick has no dimension and it looks very thin. So back to the designer side of the discussion, the design side. When you're doing thin brick, you have to provide opportunities for the brick to look like brick, if that makes any sense at all. I know that sounds kind of weird, but the corners back behind me where the brick wraps around, that's an incredibly important detail to sell this. I'm looking kind of backwards in the camera. If I just covered up the return there, it would start to look fake pretty quick. And what I did is I took a look at the corners of these things and how other buildings that I saw did their corners. And I want to switch screens here and show you a couple photos. So as I'm getting ready to design something, I always look for inspiration photos. Now this is a different brick supplier here in town. This is Acme Brick, and this was some of their samples on the wall. They couldn't get me the thin brick I needed. It was a nightmare dealing with those guys. I think they're nice enough people, but they didn't want to provide thin brick. They wanted to provide full dimensional brick. But I did take pictures of it to get a sense of, hey, do I want this nice clean edge brick? Do I want something with a little more texture in the face? Do I want something with round edges? How do you want to do this? Then I went out and took pictures of buildings here in Denver for some of the detail that I wanted. And you'll see in this one, there's some, oh man, I'm going to forget what this is called. It's not Rolock, it's the other way where you actually stand the brick up on end. And maybe that is Rolock. I'm trying to think. No, it's not Rolock. It's another version of that. It's not a soldier. A soldier's where you stand them up this way, and that's this way. I'm forgetting my terminology. But anyway, you can see like every fifth row is that, and they use that in the big, deep, multi-withe construction, which means multiple layers of brick to hold up a wall. They use those to tie one layer of brick back into another. So they would lay up a face brick here, then an intermediate, and then a back brick there to get 3 layers of brick, and this is what would tie it together. So kind of researching and finding some of those images, this is the same building, and the detail at the corner, how it came out of a window and what that looked like, what the joints look like. You can see these are raked really deep, and I like the roughness of that. So if you watched my video that I put out yesterday, you'll see that I intentionally smoothed out the joints and then made them rough so that they would look like this. And then if you look at the brick, the faces of the brick have a lot of detail in them, some burn marks where the bricks were stacked in the kiln and they get burnt between, and then the variation in color. And I think, I'm going to switch cameras again. When you look back behind me, a lot of that detail is very evident in what came out. Back to the inspiration images here. Then it was some of this stuff. So this is an exterior detail as well, different building. They used kind of a monolithically colored brick. This was taken at night, so I apologize. But they wrapped one brick around the corner. They did a vertical here, and then they infilled that panel. And then below it, they did the same Rolock type detail with a running bond below. So if we look back behind me again, this is what I got from that detail is we have a stack bond on the corner, and then we have running bond between, and it really sells that pilaster look. Then the last thing I want to touch on is a picture from my former office in Kansas City. So my former office in KC was a 10-story office building, and they had service windows and all these other kinds of things that they had filled in over the years. So this is a former window. You can see the arch here for the header, and then the window obviously there was a lintel here, and then the window filled in this. The brick doesn't quite match, and that's where the inspiration for this blind window, let's see, there we go, this blind window behind me came. And I wanted to fill that in with something completely different that was just an interesting texture or pattern. But you can see on the edges of that, I actually used a dimensional brick and sawed the ends off. So I took one of these and sawed the ends off so that it would be twice as thick as a thin brick, and used that to go around. Man, this is impossible to look in the camera and try and do this. But the perimeter of the window is done with those larger bricks, and then I actually sawed the faces off of a handful of full-size bricks as well to do the soldier pattern arch above, and then the keystone in the middle, which is a pretty common detail in brick. If you have an arch, you have a keystone in the middle. That comes from the ancient Romans and all that kind of stuff. But it's a local stone, which I thought would just be a cool detail to put in there to talk about. I was just out on a hike one day, saw this flat stone, and decided to pick it up, bring it home, and it seemed to fit color-wise with the rest of the wall, and it was just a no-brainer. Actually, at the bottom of that window opening, I need to use my other hand, good gravy, there it is. At the bottom of the window opening, these bricks here are cut on a little bit of an angle, there we go, to look like that window ledge. I don't know how successful that was. You can't perceive it very well in the videos for sure, but it was just another small detail that I wanted to include. And then lastly, if we take a look over here, and sorry for the shaky cam, guys, you can see I used that same brick edge detail here and did a stack bond on the corner and then ran running bond in between. It was just, again, to add that little touch of detail that makes this whole thing believable, like it could have been done 100 years ago. So that's kind of design-wise how I approach this, but I would share with you, if you're going to do any project like this at your house where you're improving, Pinterest is a really good place to look. You can just get on there and type in brick patterns. And then this is true for anything, whether it's furniture design or bricks or what have you. I think if I go back, there's even some more interesting. So, this is just all these crazy things that you can do with brick that I could have done here if I wanted a really modern look. Or this one here used the herringbone all the way around, and then they used all these soldier coursings and things like that. But there's a myriad of photos out there that you can you can look at to do your research, and those are extremely helpful when you're designing anything. I'm going to take a quick peek. Why did I decide not to alternate the corner pieces long and short? Cecil. So it was basically just to bring in a detail to make it look more real. So if you look at a brick building, on the corners of the building, usually about 4 feet from the corners, there's always a vertical joint. It's a soft joint to allow the bricks to expand and contract. I didn't have, if I'd have used that 4-foot dimension in here, I would have never had those joints, or they would have been in a really awkward place. So my thought was on those pilasters back over here is that go ahead and run that vertical joint and kind of sell that detail at the corner. Also, the corners are a place where historically architects have used those. They put coins on them, which, how do you spell coins? It's not coins like you and I would think. It's Quioins, I think. They'll put big coins at the corners, or they'll do different details. So I just wanted my corners to have that detail. I could have absolutely run them in with a running bond and done that, but I thought, as I sort of sketched through it, and I did a lot of drawings of this thing before I actually built it, but as I sketched through it, it just didn't have enough detail because these are so small. This thing's only a couple feet wide, and back over here, this is probably my biggest expanse. This little half wall here, my biggest expanse of running bond, and it's really not very big. So it was just to bring in some more detail. That's really the only reason that I did it. Yeah, Johnny, you're absolutely right. The corners are what sell it. It's the little details that you have to pay attention to, and the way that you cut. And again, I'm trying to point the little triangular pieces that fill in. You have to do a wonderful job at those. I can't tell you how many of those I threw away because they didn't fit just right. And if they don't fit right, it just doesn't sell the project. You have to be on point. So let's see. Jerry says, how often do you find something you designed that doesn't work when you try it and make it? All the time, Jerry. I talk about failure in some of my videos, and believe me, this was the first time that I laid up thin brick in this quantity. I've laid other brick. I did a mailbox project at my last house. I wish I had a photo of that. It was incredibly detailed. It had some corbelling on it. It had stack bond. It had inlaid cast stone on it. Wonderful little project, and I'm not saying that because I designed it. It was designed by me doing a bunch of research and finding some really cool details in mailboxes and then some other things that I wanted to do. So, but in doing that, I try and make as many mistakes as I can on paper. It is so fast and inexpensive to draw through things. And if you can draw in 3 dimensions, or you can model in SketchUp or Fusion or any of those things, you can see it. And it's so close to being real that you can make your mistakes on paper very quickly and inexpensively. So I would say, Jerry, that's where I try and make all my mistakes. This one I had a SketchUp model of, and I don't know, I probably went through at least a dozen iterations of the brick pattern, where they were going to sit, how big this kind of blind window behind me. It changed shape and size and location. Do I center it? Do I put it off center? How do I do it? And this is where I landed. Again, do you put a full-size brick around the perimeter, a full-size stretcher this way? Do you do just the butt end? Do you do it this way? And eventually you draw it enough times that you get through and you land on, yeah, this is what works. I left a lot of details out of the video. I had a whole section on me drawing, and it was like 5 minutes long. I may put that up just as a behind-the-scenes kind of thing, because I think it tells that story. It was me drawing through this window and how many bricks it would take and how wide and all these other kinds of things. But I hope that answers your question, Jerry. But yeah, every once in a while you put something up on the wall, or you cut something out of wood that just flat doesn't work. And my theory is, or my stance is, you have to be willing to throw those things away. And you're not throwing away the complete idea, you're throwing away that iteration. And to go to the next iteration is the most important thing, right? You can't stop. And I used to have a quote from Winston Churchill. It was like, never, 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 never give in. It's something along those lines. And you can't give in. If you have an idea that you want to realize, it's not an easy thing to do. It looks really simple on a slickly edited YouTube video that takes 10 minutes or what have you, but the real amount of time that you put into it can be enormous to get the result that you want, and you have to be willing to do that. I see Randy Richard just showed up. Nice to see you, Randy. But we're talking about it for those that are coming in a little bit late. We're talking about what it takes to get your idea and to get it in the way you want it, and how often you have a failure. And I'll bet my failures 10 years ago were way more than they are now. You just sort of gain that experience where you can understand whether or not something's going to be a failure before it happens, and you try and mitigate that as much as you can. Cecil asked a question here: how long did it take to grout all the joints? The grouting actually went a little bit faster than I thought it would. I want to say that it took me, I worked about 2 hours at a time. I've been having back problems. They're better now, thank goodness. But I had about 2 years worth of back problems, and the bending over and stuff like that, I could only stand so much of it, but I tried to do about 2 hours at a time, and that would let things dry out enough to where I could continue going. But I think it took me 4 nights to grout this at 2 hours at a time. Now that's me going slow. There are a lot of corners and a lot of details. If it was a wide wall, like a 16-foot wide wall that you just did, common running bond on, you could literally do that grouting in a day easy. And like I'm saying here, this would have been a day if I'd have knocked it all out at once, but this isn't a big expanse. But it doesn't take nearly as long as you would think it would. Speaking of which, a couple people made comments on my video about this tool. So this is a jointing tool. Can't remember the official name. I think it's just a brick jointing tool. But a few people made comments, the high altitude, less gravity, less stress on the back. That is not true. I wish it were. But this tool, a lot of people use it in the wrong fashion. And there's no really wrong way to use a tool, but this tool actually works a little bit differently. There's some pieces on it. So this knuckle right here is what I've always used, and when I've watched masons lay up big brick walls, it's what they use. And that is what puts the initial compaction on the joint. So you put the grout into the joint on thin brick. In real life, you would set the brick into a bed of mortar and the joint would sort of squirt out. But you use that to knock down the first pass, I guess. And that compresses everything into the joint really well and gets rid of all the fluff or the extra grout that's on the outside. And then you come back with the tip of the tool. If you want a smooth joint, you come back with the tip of the tool and work that joint smooth. And the tip of the tool is really good for doing the intersection pieces and all that. You can use this knuckle part of the tool anywhere along, and you could use it exclusively if you really wanted to, but I always switch back and forth between the two. But a lot of folks don't know that little trick that this is where you do the bulk of your work when you're just kind of doing that rough smoothing out. But yeah, it's amazing to me how few tools it takes to do masonry. When you look at woodwork or metal work or anything like that, masonry is really a mixer, a trowel, and some jointing tools and a string line level. That's all it really takes to do a job like this. It's very simple. But let's see. Daryl has something good to say here. Success is knowing between failure and another opportunity to try it. Yeah, knowing the difference between failure and another opportunity to try it. I mean, we always go back to Edison, right, with the light bulb. And, it was, people say, he failed 250 times, however many times it was that he had to try the light bulb first. And it wasn't failure 250 times. It was finding out what options or what opportunities didn't work. So sometimes finding what doesn't work is just as important as finding what does. And then that led him to go thinner and thinner on his I want to say tungsten string, tungsten thread, whatever it was that he wound up with. But anyway, yeah, so there's brick design, and I've been on for 20 minutes. I don't want to bore anybody to death, but I did want to talk a little bit about the design of this wall and how it came about. I think if I would have just flat out laid stretchers all the way across a running bond, it would have been a little more boring. It wouldn't have had the detail that it has now, and it wouldn't have sold that. Actually, one of the best comments I got was from John Hayes. He has a pretty big YouTube channel. I think he's over 500,000. I know that. But he said to me in his comment, he said, "I thought that had been there forever. You had me fooled." And that's a great compliment, getting that when you sell this. I would love to do a little bit more of my garage in this brick, but it is time consuming, and I'd rather work on projects than work on my garage sometimes. So I'll probably leave it at this. So I think that's where I want to leave today's video. If anybody has any questions or anything like that, just put them in the chat here real quick. And if not, I'm going to sign off and get busy on the rest of the work that I have today. I'll give it just a couple seconds here. Yeah, it looks like that's it. So everybody, I hope you have fun out in your garages, and have a great weekend. Take care.